school. So in terms of all the statements you submit and in terms of the care that you put into your application, you know, take the time to put care into it, because we're looking for that reason to admit you. So any explanations you can provide, any additional insight you can provide is very helpful to us.
Wonderful. And I see a few schools are responding to questions and giving some FYI. So students, please take a look at that. Someone's talking about the LSAT and LSAT Flex and study options. One of the students is asking, what do you recommend a student who plans to go to law school that has to work at least a part-time job to support themselves?
I can take a stab at that. Hi, everybody. My name is Branden Nicholson from Wake Forest Law. You know, again, I think it goes back to the part that we understand that you're human and that not every situation is going to be one that you are independently wealthy and don't have to work during school. But I do think that it's important to point out, to the extent possible, that you are focused on your academics over time. Again, when we are making an assessment of your readiness for law school, we're going to be looking at, can you handle the rigors of the law school curriculum? And I think that to the extent that you show through your resume and through your transcript that you can handle both work and keep up an academic, you know, keep up a good performance in your academics, I think that speaks highly to you. And if you are looking to work after undergrad, I think that also can serve you well. You know, you just have to make sure that you are using your time appropriately. And again, you know, we know that you're human, and so we're going to look to see how you've used that time and experience to add to your file and give us a reason to admit you to law school.
And Ms. Johnson, if I can just add on to that, Max Pennington from Emory University School of Law in Atlanta, Georgia. Just to add on what Mr. Nicholson was saying, confirm with the law schools that you're interested in that they do offer part-time and or evening programs before you spend the money on that application. You will notice, if you haven't already, that the applications are expensive. And if you are applying to multiple, those costs can add up quickly. So just confirm before you start applying. And I can go ahead and advise you that Emory Law does not offer evening and or part-time. So just FYI, if you were looking at Emory, I do apologize for that, but we just do not offer it at this time.
Kristal, I would love to say a couple things. Greetings from Cumberland School of Law in Birmingham. I do think one thing I would encourage students to do is to look at the full-time programs first. Some programs, some flex programs or part-time programs do not offer scholarship, whereas some a lot of full-time programs do. And you may find that the amount of scholarship that you receive if you're admitted to a school may compensate you enough that it will help, and you can use some federal loans and other things to go full-time and go ahead and finish your 3 years of law school. In addition to that, I think too, if you forego the income at the end of 3 years of law school if you stretch out law school too much. So just take those things into consideration as well.
There was a comment that was made. Thank you all for that. There was a comment that was made in the chat that I think is really viable. Hopefully the student looked at it, but it says some schools that are full-time will not allow you to work, at least in the first semester. You don't want to compromise your law school academic record, especially in your first year due to working. So ask the law school about their policies. So kind of echoing what was just said. Another student was asking, does the amount of pro bono work vary from law school to law school?
All right, so my name is Alessandra. I am an admissions officer at Harvard Law School. Happy to answer this question. So for us, the American Bar Association does mandate that each graduating JD candidate have completed at least 50 hours of pro bono or unpaid legal work. The average number of hours completed by each Harvard Law School student is 640. So we are a service-oriented law school. We are the largest legal provider in the state of Massachusetts. It's a statistic that we are very proud of. And most of these pro bono hours are achieved through our robust clinical program, as well as student practice organizations, which are essentially baby clinics for first-year students. So it's a great question.
All right, another question in the chat. Thank you so much for that. I don't know if anyone else wanted to chime in on it. All right, another question in the chat was, how should applicants in this upcoming cycle go about potentially taking the November LSAT? I think part of that was answered in the chat with the different options. Does anyone want to chime in or add to that? Ms. Nicholson, Ms. Syme?
Well, I would chime in. I believe the deadline to register for the November LSAT, I believe, is tomorrow. So I would take a look at that on LSAC's website. But I did see in the chat, adequate preparation is definitely key to this. So if you are planning on taking the November LSAT, make sure that you're giving yourself the time that you have to prepare for that, whether you're registering for a prep course formally or you're doing self-study, whatever it is. Should be rigorous preparation so that the outcome is hopefully what you want it to be for the schools that you are applying to.
I might just add quickly that I don't know if some students are aware that you can begin your application process before you have every component complete. So you can start submitting your electronic applications and putting together your letters of recommendation and your transcripts and your personal statement. You can be piecing together all of those elements of your application file prior to getting your LSAT score. So if you are going to be taking an LSAT score that's a little bit later in the cycle and you're at all nervous about your ability to apply timely, then you can be already working on and compiling all of your other elements so that when your LSAT score is released, that's the last piece of your application and you can go straight to review and get a decision as quickly as possible that way. So for students who are concerned about taking a later LSAT, you should still be preparing the rest of your application, whether or not you press submit or not. I would argue you probably should, right? It puts you on a school's radar. They can start communicating with you and making sure that you have all the information that you need in terms of timelines and things. So start those conversations early if you can. But even if you're someone that's nervous, you don't want to press submit yet, you should absolutely be compiling and working on all of those things. Do not wait until you get your LSAT score to determine whether or not you're going to apply. If you think you're going to apply, you should be building your application now, even as you prepare for the LSAT.
I just want to add to that, you should give yourself enough time to prep. There is free LSAT prep services available to you from Khan Academy. We've been talking a lot about LSATs on this call, and the law school application isn't 100% LSAT driven. I mean, there's other elements that is far more important than LSAT, but we all keep saying that you can take it multiple times, we'll take the highest score, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. This should be a test that you're preparing for to do well on the very first try. This exam costs $200 a pop. I have a full-time job and I don't have $200 to give away. So you should be, when you get ready to take this exam, unless you have a fee waiver, because the Law School Admissions Council does offer fee waivers for the LSAT, which will then give you additional free prep resources. And most schools who see that you have an LSAC fee waiver will also waive their application fee if they have one. So prepare, take it once, do the best you can. And you have to understand that schools admit students along a spectrum in terms of the LSAT. If you remember how to get to the median, that means half of the students had above or below that. It doesn't mean everybody had a 160 and a 3.6. So you just want to be along the spectrum along with your LSAT and GPA, but you want to build upon that with the other great solid elements of your applications, which are personal statement, which is equally as important, and your letters of recommendations. So those two things are just as important as your LSAT. And those are also things that you cannot wait until last minute to do.
Mrs. Johnson, I may add something real quick. With timing being involved as well, I would also recommend that you let your letter writers know well in advance that you like letters of recommendation in, be it if your timeline requires it to be in before Thanksgiving. Just give them a bunch of notice, because you'll have a lot of students reaching out to potentially some of the same professors in writing those letters. And I always also think it's a great idea to tell your letter writers why you want to go to law school, because they can tie that into your character, your work ethic, and how you may contribute to the law school community.
I would just chime in here for a second too. I just wanted to say, while I'm agreeing with my co-panelists here, these are really great pieces of information for all of you. I don't know if every law school has a priority scholarship deadline. So for example, for many of you that are here, you're kind of at the beginning part of the genesis of applying to law school. Some law schools have opened their application September 1, some are October 1st, ours is October the 1st. But we have a priority scholarship deadline. I mean, this year we had, not only did we have a wait list, we had a priority wait list. And I can tell you the funding towards the end of the process was really, really small, even with top applicants. So I agree with Amy when she said too, I mean, when you think about submitting your application, I mean, you could apply and you could even get an offer. And I personally will spend time with students if they want to reach out. Maybe they have an offer of admission and they think they have a few more points in them. While I agree with Jimmy, sometimes your first go at things don't always go as you plan. But you know, if there is a time for recourse with 9 LSATs offered per year now, which is you know, when it was a couple of years ago it was 4, then it was 6, and now it's 9. And I don't know if you count May this year, there'll be 10. I don't know. But if you think about that too, so you know, I'm willing to work with our students in that way. Who doesn't want scholarship money? So I mean, this year we offered probably the most in our 121-year history. So you know, which is over $4 million, and that includes anything from just a few thousand up to full tuition. So you know, every one of these schools, I mean, these are all top schools. I mean, you all have wonderful choices, but you know, some are going to be better fits than others. But look at people's timelines, get to know the admissions people that are hopefully going to be your best advocates. You know, I do this because I love helping students, you know, get to where they want to go. So, and that includes getting the most amount of scholarship that you can too. So being an early applicant can only help you in the long run, because it does provide time for recourse, in my opinion. So, but check with each law school for that. I do that at my school, and I'm always happy to help students along that path.
Wow, you guys are incredible. Like every single question that these students are asking, before I can even get to it to say it audibly, you've already answered it. So a lot of the questions that are in here that you all have posed, it's already been answered. So just read the chat. And we're almost getting to the end where we start our breakout rooms in just a moment. Let's see.
Kristal?
Yes, sir.
The question about the gap year, I think there's a lot of people, I think the gap year depends on what you want to do. For those of you who know you want to start law school right after undergraduate school, like you know that's what you want to do, you should do that. I don't think there's, I mean, unless, you know, there are a couple of schools that sort of have more of a business school model approach to this, where they prefer work experience as part of the application, that kind of thing, then, you know, that's a different question. And I think you should reach out to schools and ask about that. But I think the idea that you should automatically take a gap year is an erroneous one. With regards to, you know, what it means in an application, it depends on what you do. I mean, if you take a year off and drink beer on your couch for an entire year, that's not a good idea for a gap year. But, you know, or at least I guess that depends on how you write that to us, right? And so I think with regards to the gap year, it's an individual decision, and, you know, you should have a reason that you can explain to the admissions committee that describes, if you will, why you took the gap year. But I wouldn't automatically assume that it's a positive or a negative. It just depends on your individual application.
I will. Absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
And I'm Xavier Brown, University of Georgia School of Law. Everything that Mr. State said is absolutely correct. I wouldn't be able to restate that any better if I try. The only thing I want to add to that or flesh out is the idea of not having a good reason. Some students think that needing to take a break just for a break's sake is not a good reason. I think that's still a pretty good reason to take a year off or a semester off, however that lands with your undergraduate career. In addressing that in the application, that may be just a line that says, you know, after taking a year to consider my options, I'm sure now that going to law school is for me. That's really as much as you would address it, I think, in that situation. But law school is difficult at all these schools. So I think you would do yourself a great disservice to enter the process with your tank on empty, in a sense. So make sure that if you need that time, if you need some time for exploration or just to catch your breath, give yourself that as well.
Can I just
if I could add to Mr. Brown's.
Who's that?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jimmy.
I yield to you, Dean Lambert.
I was just going to say, I mean, what Mr. Brown said is really pertinent, because I think sometimes when students enter law school and they're not ready for the rigor of it, or for whatever reason, they're not 100% sure or more than 100% sure they want to be there, it's a burden instead of a rewarding challenge. And how you approach something can really affect your mindset and the outcome. So that's all I wanted to add. Attitude definitely does make a difference in law school.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on, people take gap years for various reasons. So maybe because they want to explore more career options, and maybe because they had a great fellowship offer, or they may be a student athlete who got an opportunity to play professional sports, right? But I would encourage those who are pretty confident that law school is what they want to do, and you're going to take a gap year, to get as many things prepared and done before you take your gap year. So for example, taking your LSAT is like one of the biggest hurdles to applying to law school. And I would encourage you, even if you're not ready to go right away, to still go ahead and take your LSAT. That score is going to be good for about 5 years. So you have that 5 years to use the score. Because once you leave college in this college setting, preparing for an exam such as the LSAT and thinking critically like you would need to think for the LSAT can become a challenge. So I would encourage you to take that off your plate before you take your gap year, because that is the absolute biggest hurdle, and you know it's already done, that's out the way. So all you have to do when you get ready to apply is follow up with your recommenders, write your personal statement, and start submitting your applications.
I'm going to follow up after Jimmy and agree with those sentiments. What I would encourage you guys to do is whatever you decide to do, go after it with vigor. Jump into it 100%. If you take a gap year because you've decided to go work for a business, or you have decided to go climb the Alps, or you got an NFL contract, which actually happened, and one of our students that recently graduated spent 7 years in the NFL. Whatever you do, go after it with vigor, because when we're reading your application, we're looking for those high quality indicators that said, yes, I climbed the Alps, I backpacked across Europe, I played in the NFL for 7 years, or I worked for a Fortune 500 company for 4 years. Or if you decide to go to law school directly after undergrad, once again, go after it with vigor, go after it. Study for the LSAT with a serious mindset. Put together your application from the activities that you did in undergrad. And we want to see that whatever you do, you have given your best. And so, and I will give, along with that encouragement, I'll give one warning. I talk to a lot of students who put off LSAT study because they think they'll have more time when they start working than they did when they were in college. And most of us who have full-time jobs will tell you that's generally not true. You're in an academic mindset while you're in school, and you have more free time than you think you do. And when you have to catch the train, the bus, the car, get through traffic, get to your job, pay bills, go back home, get your clothes ready. You have less time than you think you will, and you're using your energy in different ways. So when Jimmy was saying, take the LSAT seriously and think about putting yourself into LSAT study now so that you can get your best score, I second that, because you really, really, really want to take the energy you have and go ahead and knock that LSAT out, especially if you know you're going to law school.
Do we have time for just one quick comment on that, Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
So I would absolutely agree with everything that's been said. One thing I would add, yes, if you have the opportunity to play in the NFL or climb the Alps or work for a Fortune 500 company, definitely do that with vigor. But also if your option is to be a bartender, to work at Walgreens, to work at, you know, the mall, to take care of an ailing parent, whatever that is, do that with vigor too. Some of the best applications we've had have been from people who might not have had the most glamorous options after undergrad, but who, because of a lot of exigent circumstances in their life, needed to do things other than go to law school right away. The single best letter of recommendation I've ever had was from a restaurant manager for an applicant who worked as a bartender. And because of just the vigor with which this woman approached her job and the way she stuck up for her coworkers against drunk patrons and everything, we knew without reading the rest of her application that we wanted her at the law school, and she's ended up being one of the best law students we've ever had. So whatever it is that you're doing, and whether that's 1 year or several years, our oldest law student at UNLV right now is 78, so that's a lot of gap years, but there are still a lot of things that that person has done with their life that lead to valuable experience and are making them wonderful at what they're doing. So whatever it is that you're bringing to the table, just do it with vigor, and then as Dean Lambert said, make sure that you tell us what you did in the application so we can understand how that makes you stand out as an applicant.
Very, very cool. I'm just amazed and so glad that you all have joined us, students and our panelists. We couldn't have done this without our panelists. So I will give my round of applause now. You guys can use your